vamos a dar inicios con una serie de conferencias. Ya tenemos a nuestro primer expositor listo, quien nos va a hablar sobre hechos y cifras del seguro marítimo a nivel mundial. Para eso recibimos a Lars Lange, Secretario General de la International Union of Marine Insurance. Un poco de la hoja de vida de él. Lars es licenciado en Derecho Marítimo de la Universidad de Göttingen en 1995. Ha dedicado su vida profesional a los seguros marítimos como jefe del Departamento de Seguros Marítimos, suscripción y también reclamaciones. Jefe del Departamento de Seguros Marítimos y Aéreos de la Asociación Alemana de Seguros en Berlín. Actualmente es el secretario general de la Unión Internacional de Seguros Marítimos, donde se ocupa de las actividades de la Organización Marítima Internacional y también fomenta las relaciones con otras partes interesadas del sector marítimo, como las asociaciones. Así que estamos listos para recibirlo. Bienvenido.
Works. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. Do I get my slides, maybe? Not yet. Well, anyhow, yeah, there we are. Wonderful. Yeah, sorry for having this presentation in English this morning, so I beg for your pardon, but I'm sure we have good translation. Extremely happy to be here and to address you for 30 minutes this morning about IUMI statistics, a bit after that on IUMI work in addition as well, but 90% of my presentation will be about IUMI statistics, the very recent ones, a bit about markets in the beginning. For those of you who have not had that much contact with IUMI that far, IUMI is the International Marine Insurance Association. Our members is national insurance associations. We do have 43 national marine insurance associations as our members, which is more than 90% of the world market, which entitles us to speak, in our view, on behalf of the marine insurance internationally and to address this to international entities like the IMO, European Union, other stakeholders like ship owners, class, and so on. So that's us. To stress this in the very beginning, we are very happy that we agreed with Alstom earlier this year in May on a very formal cooperation agreement. So Latin America, as we are pretty well aware, is a special area. It is Spanish speaking, and so far it's good to have a strong partner in this area here, and this is what we settled with an agreement with Alstom. We would like to team up very much more with Alstom in the future to address these markets here. We don't compete with Alstom. This is very important to say with Alstom in this area here. What we would like to do is to add our services here and to deliver comprehensive services when it comes to education, statistics, and so on here in the area. So stay tuned. There's something to come. We have a cooperation agreement, and then we'll step by step work on that. Yeah, that's already mentioned my agenda. 90% will be about the statistics, and then a bit about our policy work, education, and other things. I see on my monitor here everything in Spanish, which is quite funny. I know my slides, but I have to translate my own presentation. If you see me a bit struggle, that's the reason. Okay, start with the markets. This is statistics. As I have seen yesterday afternoon, there was already something about macroeconomics, economy, trade development, and so on. This might double a bit, but this is not too bad. I will reiterate a few things, and this sets the scene for our own IUMI statistics to come. Now it's English, great. To come afterwards. So starting with economy, with trade as such, as we have seen yesterday, this is slightly decreasing. The GDP growth had been 3.2% last year. We are down, most likely this year, 2019, to 2.7%. And the expectation for the next 5 years is that we stay more or less In this range, reasons here, so this is the green bars. Reasons very obviously here, as you see, is we have a decline in trade growth. We do already have a trade growth, which was in 2018 about 4%. Keep this in mind, 4%. And also investments in industrial production is decreasing a bit, down to 2.7 this year, and also with a downwards tendency as we see. What concerns me a bit, you see this pretty well in this graph here, is the trade development. The growth in trade, in international trade of values, has always been higher than the GDP growth as such. Means GDP has grown, but the trade even more means things have been shipped and trade even more than they have been produced. And this is obviously changing in the meantime. This may already be an impact of the trade tensions which we see internationally. I don't know whether it's that easy, but at least you see that this is pretty obvious in this chart here. And this is, of course, impacting our business. Less trade, less shipping, less basis for our business. So this is a projection for the next 10 years, GDP growth 2018 to 2028. And as you see, and this is a mega trend, very clearly, as you see, 57% of the trade growth, according to IHS Markit, with whom we cooperate in this regard, 57% of the trade growth next 10 years, Asia Pacific. So this is where the future is, very clearly. If you look at China, 35%, 35%. Don't forget about India, 9%. And the United States, modest, 15.9%. North America as a whole, 18.1%. And if you only add here in this graph the so to say, old established economies, North America, Western Europe, you end up with 25%, 26%, like that. This is a quarter. For the future, when it runs normal, not speaking about trade tensions and other things, but nevertheless, the future very obviously lies in Asia Pacific. This is here a bit more in detail. You see North America still pretty well, but you see a downward trend in GDP growth next few years. The established markets, particularly Japan, Western Europe, very slow growth, 1%. That's not that much. We see the emerging markets in Europe, Africa, Middle East, better developing, but from a lower level, of course. And here as well, on the very right, other Asia Pacific, this is where we have to expect the growth. So this is something also developed by IHS Markit. We have already seen this yesterday. This is a so-called PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index. One should take this very serious. This is a bit of a mood indicator. So what do the purchase managers say? How is the trade in the future developing? And one can very generally say all above 50 is good for economy, is good for growth, is good for increasing trade. When it turns below 50, we have a problem with the future development. And whether you take in this graph here United States, Eurozone, China or Japan, it's all decreasing and it's all already below 50. And this is very clearly an indicator for our personal business in marine insurance for the future. So this is not really promising and should lead us as well in our consideration for the future strategy. This year is about inflation and interest rates. We saw this already as well yesterday. I don't tell you a secret. The upper left one is about inflation, very modest. And on the lower right, you see this is a bit small, but this is about the interest rates. We saw this yesterday, and this is here as an example, as well as we have seen yesterday, the 10-year government bond yields, and it is very, very low. What does this mean for our business? Very clearly, we don't make money, or we don't at least make that much money at the financial markets as we may have made in the past. It's about technical underwriting business. This is where we have to be successful. And this should also be part of our strategy. Trade by sea grows. We have this seen last year 4%, but declining. This was my very first chart. But the growth of the global fleet is slowing down, I would say, at least slowing down. You see the gray bars On the right, that is the development of the overall fleet. We are currently at about 1.3 billion gross tons. We see we have a long-term development that this is getting bigger in size. But nevertheless, when you look at the right, at the red line, this is the percentage of the development of the fleet, and this is slowing down to something about 2% in the future. This is decreasing. We have currently 4,000 new builds in the order books, which is about 80 million gross tons, with an existing fleet of 1.3 billion gross tons. We see the most expensive new builds, funny enough, still in Europe, which is very much about cruise ship industry. We see the most technically advanced and biggest vessels ordered in Korea. And we see very much that China is also upcoming here. This is also about fleet growth, but this is by country. I hope you can see this. And particularly on the right, you see Greece is still the biggest market when it comes to ship ownership, 17%. But China very clearly with 13% and massively growing already second and very likely to be first in a number of years. And if you look at these four brown sections or yellow yet sections of this pie, this is the Asian share, and this is already nearly 50%. So exactly the same message as with the GDP growth. Asia is very much in the forefront. Another interesting thing on the left side, there are two lines. The upper one is Japanese-owned vessels, and the lower one is Chinese-owned vessels. And as you can see, this has already changed, and the development was quite clear. China, in the meantime, owns more vessels when it comes to Asia than Japan. This is my very last slide here on the markets as such. This is from Clarkson Research, with whom we also cooperate on statistics, and this is a so-called Clark C index. This is day rates for vessel charter, and as you can see, this is starting in 1990. This is not an index, this is by numbers. It starts in 1990, and apart from the boom which we have seen in the early 2000s before it really dropped, it's more or less exactly the same. So this is not really promising. So where does this all lead to? It's again not really a secret, but we have also for our strategy for the future to take into account rather challenging markets, GDP growth, slowing down trade volume, at least less growing, fleet development to a degree, yes, but also less interest rates, inflation rates, mood of the industry. It's all not a catastrophe, but it's all pretty challenging. Means we have to work on our own business to make us successful in the future. We can't simply count on an excellently developing overall industry and then put our business simply in a line with that. So having said that, I come to the IUMI statistics. This is pretty new. This has been published in September this year during our conference in Toronto. This is first-hand information. So our mentioned 43 member countries, and not only these member countries, also other entities. For example, Alstom is kind enough to provide us with the numbers for Latin America. This is all in here, but this is really from the insurance companies to the associations to us, and then consolidated in these charts here, which you may have seen before in one or the other presentation. That's really what the markets are about. This here is marine premium as a whole. We've been worldwide, we've been at about $29 billion in 2018. It's all about 2018. And this does mean we had a growth last year of 1%. Bearing in mind what I said in the beginning, we had a trade growth of 4%, we had a GDP growth of 3.2%, means this does not reflect that we have really enriched in premium quality. We have not even matched with the growth of the basis of our business. We have grown by 1%, but this is less than the overall growth of economy and trade and so on. And one has to bear in mind that the growth is solely depending on cargo. We have no growth in hull, and we have, in the contrary, a decrease, as we will see, in offshore energy business. So modest development. By lines of business, now it's a cargo market internationally. 57% of the premium is cargo. Hull is 24, marine liability 6.7. This is not including the P&I business, and 11.6% offshore energy, although the oil price impacts this very much. What is the message in this chart here? This is the very same premium cake, but now distinguished by regions. And as you see, we have here as well an Asian share of 30.7%. In the meantime, it was in 2008, as far as I remember, somewhere around 20%. It was last year 29%, the year before 27%, like that. This is a very, very clear and long-term ongoing tendency. Asia is growing, Europe is declining, more business is written locally, the business in Asia develops. So this is something which us as an association guides very, very much. We opened offices, held conferences and so on, are very much more in Asia. In the meantime, this is where developments happen. And this is apart from all these developments which have to be borne in mind, of course, whether this is trade tensions, I wouldn't call it a trade war at this stage, whether this is in declining oil price, which is surely impacting Chinese development and other things. Nevertheless, this is a very strong overall tendency. Broken down to Hull, I mentioned this already. Hull is at about $7 billion. This is exactly the same as in the year before. This is not really good news. And the regional spread, as you see here, even more obvious. 41% of the Hull premium is written in Asia, 45% remaining in Europe. You see Latin America here, your area, with 5.8%, which is not too bad and very stable. So congratulations on that, but a clear tendency to Asia. Three observations with regard to the Hull premium. This is not from the IUMI statistic, to mention this very clearly. This is statistics from one of our member associations from the Scandinavian market. This is not only Scandinavian vessels by nature, but this is vessels written in Scandinavia. And this graph here shows you the relation between the global marine hull premium. This is the red line. I hope you can see this on the graph. Yeah, it looks quite good. And the fleet development. The green line is the gross tonnage. The blue line, the second highest, is the number of ships above 300 gross tons. And then we have at the very base the average insured vessel value. This is an index starting by 100%. What you see very clearly here is that the premium is not matching, to say the least, with the development of the fleet. And this is a threat, of course, for the future. And this does very clearly show that the hull premium as a whole deteriorates in line with the ship values, and that we have, as I wrote on the right, an increasing mismatch between the fleet as such, vessel growth, and our income. And this is something which we should take serious, especially when we take in mind, we will see this later on, that we were quite lucky, if one can put it that way, quite lucky with major losses in the last few years. We see this in two slides. But this is, of course, not for granted, in the contrary, for the future. We spend a lot of money currently on attritional losses, and once the major losses would be back, it would look even worse. So this was the first observation. Second observation, also taken from the so-called NOMIS data bank of the Scandinavian insurers, is vessel frequency. This could be rather good news, as we see here. Claims frequency is going down. The green line is total losses. We are in the meantime somewhere between 0.05 and 0.1%. This is good and a very clear downwards tendency. And when it comes to claims frequency as a whole, we are at about 22%, which is also a downward trend. But to also drop negative news in this year, once a claim happens, we see very clearly it might become more serious. Higher vessel values, increased extended wordings and other factors. So the frequency as such is going down, but the individual claim by value is not necessarily going down. This is the third observation for the hull statistics, and this is about major losses. This might be difficult to see here. You see this better when you get this distributed afterwards. This shows you claims for underwriting years in a certain range, below 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, and so on. You see this line on the right. This shall show you the distinguishing line between rather attritional losses up to 5 million, if one can call this attritional losses, and then the major losses over 5 million. And we see, compared with earlier years, very clearly that we had less, this is what I mentioned, that we had less major losses, for what reason ever, in the last few years, and nevertheless struggled with our overall results. And this should lead to a consideration, in my view, but we do all know this, of course, already, to a technical underwriting and to the consideration, do we really calculate our risks appropriately, and not only with a view in the back mirror and the claims development in the last few years. But this is up to you guys to decide, of course, but this shows very clearly the threat which is in here. Just one thing that is better to see on one of the next slides here. This is again IUMI statistics, and this is the loss ratio by underwriting year. You see always for every underwriting year, year one, how the year starts with the loss ratio, and then you see the development over the next few years. And what you see here, in contrary to earlier years, if you take, for example, 2014, this is this rather yellow orange line, and 2016, this is the very top red line, is that we see a certain change in the development patterns of the underwriting years. And if you take this 2014 line, the orange one, this was one single claim which deteriorated one underwriting year very late, and this was this Lürsen claim in Bremen, where a mega yacht burned down very shortly before it would have been delivered. This alone was $800 million for one claim, and this is this is for the overall markets. You see one claim in the world statistics. This is what we have to be prepared for. This is what we have to save some money in advance for. You see the green dot here. This is where we start in 2018. So this is our incoming claims loss ratio for 2018. See how this will develop. It's by all means, if you look at the next slide, which shows you a development of the claims ratios in Hull over the last few years, to say the least, we are not making money with Hull. But this is, again, not a secret. You see the blue bar at about 80%. This is gross premiums against paid and outstanding claims for Europe and some US. This is not including costs. At your additional costs, at your increasing acquisition costs, as we call this, we know what this is containing. This is not healthy, what we see here, and this is still a trend. And as said, we have had not that much major claims in the last few years. This is the same, the development of the loss ratio for some Asian countries where we get hold of the numbers. We don't get claims information from each and every member association. This here is a smell for Asia, including China, Japan, and Hong Kong, and it's only paid claims. It's not about IBNRs and the other stuff, and shows you, even with paid claims, we are at about 70% last year for representative Asian markets. And this here is taken from the ALSOM numbers. For Latin America, Hull shows you we are at about 70% for Asia. So this was Hull. Turning to cargo, which was, as we have seen, biggest part of the premium cake, 57%. Cargo is at about 16.6 billion in the meantime. This was a growth of about 2.5%, but as already stressed, this is not even mirroring the growth in world economy and trade, which we have seen. It's more or less a sidewards development. We do see here as well Asia Pacific at 33%, Europe 39%, Latin America, the green pie, developing very well at 12%. So this is good, but nevertheless, this is what I already had and wanted to stress. This is the trade development, and this is exactly what we mirror in our premium income, but not more. And in addition, bearing in mind that we have more extended wordings, that we have higher accumulation risks, that we have higher single values, this is all what we would have to take into account. This is one slide which is very similar to the one which we have seen with regard to the fleet development in Hull. This is a trade development for the cargo, which might be seen as a kind of an indicator. You see the premium, this is the red line, and then you see above that the world trade volume, this is the middle line, and the world trade values. And this is also an index starting at 100%, and here exactly the clear message, the same clear message as for Hull. The development of the premium is by far not matching with the development of the insured values as such, and that is concerning in my view. This is again about the loss ratios. You see again the green dot, this is our starting point for 2018 at about 70%. If you look here at the developments for the years, you see that we obviously have a changing pattern. If you take the older years, this is the gray lines, you see a rather flat development, which is of course due to the recoveries which we do and which to a kind reimburse some money. And for what reason ever, obviously this is no longer the case. If you take the recent years, the underwriting years are much more deteriorating over the years. And the question is this really the new normal? Is this what we have to take into account for the future? If we take 2018, the green dot particularly, depending on which pattern of development we would take as a basis, it would either in older times develop to say 70%, which would be more or less taking costs into account to break even, or with the new developing pattern, it would end up with at about 80%. And this would very clearly, for the whole market, mean we have a loss again. This is again development of the loss ratios. It is more sustainable as in Hull, but nevertheless, if you take the 70% bar here again as a benchmark, then at costs you see that we are at least at a break even, and you see that major claims and major incidents are impacting cargo very much as well. Here are only a few mentioned. Tianjin, for example, in 2015, which has a very clear impact. Maersk Honam in 2018, where most likely a development is to follow, that still has to be seen. So that's challenging. I have here again numbers. This is for Asia, again only paid claims without any reserves. China, Japan, Hong Kong, which would be with a loss ratio at about 60% currently, and this is here the Latin American numbers taken from Alstom, which would be currently at about 50% paid claims and no costs. But nevertheless, you see a kind of a benchmark with regard to other international markets, and this could be quite promising, of course, here for this area. So this is cargo. And then very briefly at the end about offshore energy, where it is, of course, pretty obviously now as before, this is very, very much driven by the oil price. The oil price is still very low. This graph here shows you also premium development compared. Premium development is again the red line compared with the oil price as such. This is a purple line, very much at the base. Average day rates, this is the green one. This was a nightmare. We all saw this in the news. Many layups, business was as good as out of order, and number of contracted rigs. What we see is, you never know what comes, but however, a slight recovery of the oil price, whether this is a long-term tendency or not. We see that business starts again, and also the graphs here reflect this to a degree already. Which impact this might have on the premium as such, we have to see. For 2018, by all means, we still had a decrease in premium of about 4% with all consequences for the business as such. Offshore energy, now as before, very much London-centric. About 75% of the business is written in London, whether this is Lloyd's or company market, but this has, most of us know, as a massive impact on the Lloyd's business. This is claims development, shown a bit different for the offshore business. This could be seen as good or as bad news. So as you see, we have not had major claims for quite a while in the meantime. You see the major events, Ivan, Katrina, Rita, Ike in the early 2000s. The last few years we have been rather, well, I shouldn't say lucky, but we at least have not experienced major claims. This is influencing your premium negotiations for sure. And you do know that the next big issue is to come. In addition, you have higher volatility, of course, since your premium cake is lower. That makes it even more challenging, of course, for the underwriters to write long-term sustainable business. It needs a sound understanding of the clients, I would say, but this is the situation where we are. I have one add-on. We will have a presentation on that tomorrow by Charlotte Waugh, and this is very close to our hearts currently. This is about container ship fires. Since we see more and more container ship fires, we start to address this, or we have addressed this at the International Maritime Organization. We very clearly would like to change the SOLAS agreement on that, to have better fire protection on container vessels. The very first question always is, prove it. What's the numbers? And this is not that easy, as you can imagine, to get really hold of all information of container ship fires. What we have here is, and this is pretty good in my view, is again taken from the NOMIS database. This is a Scandinavian or Nordic database, and this shows you a long-term development according to their records, which include about 1,200 container vessels, and this is a long-term development. The upper one is by numbers, how many clear claims in which quarter, and the lower one is a percentage. And you see a tendency, if you take, for example, the numbers, you have Q1 and Q2 for 2019 already included here. It's a very clear upward trend. So this is what we can say. Even in the numbers, it's already visible. We have much more container vessel fire claims, and what we say in addition, this is that much avoidable. It really makes no sense to continue with that. So what I presented this morning is only 10% of what we provide on statistics. This was some highlight. We have much more. What we started last year is that we issue once a year a so-called IUMI stats report. This is it's freely available. It's existing for 2018. This was the 2017 numbers, and what I told you this morning will be in the next stats report, which shall be published in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So it's all set and done. It's currently with our PR guys to make it nice and touchy. But this is to come, and this gives you on a management level a very good overview about what's going on. And this is what you should have an eye on. This is how it looked like in the last year, and this will, as said, exactly including what I told you this morning. What I would like to mention in addition is also a new project which we run as IUMI, and this is our so-called major claims database. This is very new. We talked already about the challenge to grasp statistics on major claims. We started last year with a pilot, 2018, on major claims. For all our members, claims exceeding $250,000 for cargo and for hull. We keep it as simple as possible in the beginning, and for 100% of the gross loss. We started last year with our pilot with 5 to 6 countries and collected 1,200 claims, which was about $2.3 billion. And in year 2, this was our second pilot, so to say, which we worked on until Toronto, our last conference. We increased this from 6 countries to already 17 countries, and we had this year 4,600 claims and 7.3 billion. in US dollar in numbers. So this is a good development. It's still not really representing, but this is something which I reiterate every time I hold a presentation. We really would like to influence the collection behavior on a national level. We need these claims to build up this major claims database. This will take usually for every statistic to build something really viable up, say 10 years. But once this is done, this will be an excellent tool to discover claims patterns in the markets, to get more detailed information on major claims. This will enable us to run our business better. This will enable us as an association to argue better at IMO or wheresoever. So this is something where we always beg for your cooperation. So very quickly, my time has already run out. Just to mention this briefly, we are not only working on statistics, of course. As IUMI, we are also very much a lobbying organization. We have a seat at the IMO. We deal with other stakeholders, as mentioned in the beginning. And this is only 3 highlights here of what we are currently doing, also hopefully in your sense. One is the fire on container vessels, where we address currently and change in the SOLAS agreement. Charlotte will talk in much more detail about that tomorrow morning. This is or afternoon. This is close to our heart. As you can imagine, we have been very much involved in the change in low sulfur fuel regulation, in organizing the 0.5 sulfur cap by 1st January next year. Our fear very clearly, of course, is that this may lead to delays, that this may lead to additional vessel machine damages. Hopefully it's a bit like the Millennium debate that everything is settled. Everybody is working hard on that, but we should be prepared by all means. This is my 3rd example, cargo theft, also on our agenda. We updated our position paper, and this is on our homepage. If you have not seen this here yet, this is our so-called policy agenda, which is freely available on our homepage, where you find exactly what IUMI is currently working on when it comes to our lobbying agenda, clearly for our members, clearly also for public stakeholders, other associations. It's always visible what we do, what our positions are, what our aims are. And this is an excellent tool for you guys to see where we are already on. If you would find there's something missing on this agenda, approach us. We are your service provider, and we'll add this on the agenda. And as said, we should have the connections to really change things and to address things with the relevant authorities. Education, as Alstom, we do an education program. This might be of interest for you guys as well here in Latin America. This is a step-by-step approach. We started in 2016. What we started with is webinars. We had in the meantime nearly 40 webinars, very successful. This is freely available for everybody on the homepage, live. This is for members, also available on our homepage in a certain area, like a database. And what we are very proud of is that we establish tutorials in the meantime. And this is really comprehensive education program, A, on hull insurance, and B, on cargo insurance. This is self-studying. This is developed together with Sarnia Training in London with Charlotte Waugh. This is not for free, since we also invested quite some money in that. Cargo is 550 euros for members, 880 for non-members. Hull, which is a bit more comprehensive, is 650 for members, 1,040 for non-members. This is excellent tools for self-studying, for young underwriters, or for people changing from other lines of business to get a really sound basic knowledge and understanding of these lines of business. This is with exams at the end. It's not easy. It's really challenging, and this is as it should be. It's pretty new. We issued this September 2018 and April 2019. The subscription numbers are promising, but there is still room for improvement, so keep this in mind. Have a look. We have extremely comprehensive information on that on our homepage, iumi.com. If this is interesting, it's in English. May also train your underwriters in English in addition. Have a look or approach us. Very briefly in the end, data and digitalization. This is also something which we as an association have put as a priority. For our next few years, we are convinced that this will completely change our markets, that this will impact our markets. We have to proactively work on digitalize our business. I wouldn't say this is a disruptive situation. Maybe it is, but this is only a catchword. Fact is, if we don't do, others will do for us. So there are many data providers out there which are already pretty good in collecting information and working with information, in putting something on that which we call artificial intelligence or whatever you might call that. Fact is, behavioral data, automated data, and making better use of all the information out there, that will be crucial to steer our business in the future. And so far, we should do this proactively on our own. And even on an association level, we are convinced we have to do some work on that, take alone odd things like standardization of data, IMO numbers, and so on. So this is something we founded a forum for that and try to team up with high-tech companies out there and develop strategies for our membership to cope with that. And at the very end, connect to IUMI. How do you get in touch with us? Just a few examples. We have a good newsletter, quarterly issued, the so-called IUMI. This will be part of our cooperation. We endeavor to translate this to Spanish as well for the future, either the whole one or certain parts. But nevertheless, this is freely available on our homepage quarterly, the IUMI. We are on social media as it behaves, of course. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn. We run conferences. We have a new Asia Forum founded 3 years ago. This will be next year, free for everybody, for brokers, for industry, for insurers. Next year in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. We were this year in Shanghai with more than 300 attendees. And we have our good old IUMI conference, which is only for members, to stress this, and our affiliates, but nevertheless, that will be next year in Sweden after not having been for Europe for 5 years or so. So this is rather exceptional. And this is my very last slide. This is a new membership category which we have founded for new IUMI members, for smaller markets. This is called associate membership. This is an opportunity for a whole national market via the association. This is our members to become an IUMI associate member for an annual fee of €1,000. And this provides you with a number of rights, like access for the whole market to our conferences, like access to our comprehensive full statistics, privileged access to our education program, and so on. So if this would be of interest to one or another country here, IUMI associate membership, this is new, this is pretty affordable, and this would give you access to the IUMI family directly, so to say. This could be a nice add-on to an ALSEM membership. Very clearly, this will never replace something like ALSEM here in the region. This is too well developed, but this could be something in addition which on a purely international level might be interesting for your markets. Having said that, I thank for your attention and hope that this was useful to a degree. Thank you very much.